I was in a discussion with a pediatrician about vaccinations several years ago, probably 5 years ago. It was just an email chat going back and forth on vaccinations. And the vaccinations are the holy grail of medicine. And he was going into detail about how he's so thankful for the DPT and the MMR and all these different vaccinations, and how that they basically wiped out the whooping cough and diphtheria and tetanus and just all the different diseases that the children are vaccinated for. And when I began to pull out the statistics and the bar graphs of how actually, no, you don't really know your facts too well, because those diseases had already almost been eradicated
They're in
by
a bell
clean
curve.
hygiene. Yeah, but the bell curve, the vaccines were introduced at the bottom of the bell curve
90
after they were
percentile gone.
because
Yeah.
of clean water and clean hygiene. They weren't drinking
Right.
water that was contaminated with their own feces anymore. Those diseases were virtually eradicated before. When I began to bring up those facts, he just disengaged.
It's really strange when you see. Do you remember? I'm a lot older than you, but when Reagan was president, do you remember back then in those
I
the
do.
old days when
I'm
Reagan
not that
was
young,
president?
but yeah, I remember that.
Well, it was really strange because they had a measles outbreak, and there were a lot of pregnant women that developed measles. Well, almost all of these women had been vaccinated.
They had
for
been
measles.
vaccinated, yeah.
And what most people don't know, and this, let me tell you, a real bugaboo with me, is the Hep B vaccine that they're giving to children.
Immediately
Immediately
upon
on birth.
birth.
Not to my grandchildren.
Right.
Not to my children, but people are actually allowing it to be done, and some states are actually mandating it. Now, how can a state mandate you place your child in jeopardy? But here's the irony. Hepatitis B can be spread sexually or through a needle. How many sexually active newborns or newborns that are shooting up with drugs do you know?
I can count them all on one hand.
It's not a high number, right?
Right.
Now, does this protect them for life? No. It protects them at maximum till they're 7 years old.
At which time we still have zero.
At
in
which
that
time you still
category.
have the same number in that category.
Right.
So the hepatitis B vaccine is the easiest vaccine to say, this is total, am I allowed to say BS
Sure.
on this show?
Yep.
It is total BS because there's no medical justification for it at all. None.
Yeah.
And yet we know the side effects of it. We know the potential harm that it causes. And what no parents are told when they're giving your child a vaccine, this vaccine will cause swelling of the brain.
They all do.
Every single vaccine causes encephalitis
Yep.
or brain swelling.
Yep.
Now, how bad that brain swelling gets, it
Yeah.
varies.
There's a variety of factors that go into that.
The child's diet, whether the child is being breastfed, whether the child has good flora and fauna in its gut from being breastfed, what the mother's diets are. What the environment is. There are a myriad of factors that can determine how bad the encephalitis or brain swelling will get and how much damage it'll do. But the one thing you can guarantee, and I've done enough autopsies on infants to tell you, there is brain swelling every time you give a vaccination. And there's a real disconnect. Now, my daughter, our last two grandchildren were born in New Jersey. New Jersey has the highest autism rate in the United States. At least it did 2 years ago. It was astronomically high. It also had the highest vaccination rate. Now, when she was having the first child, her mother, my wife and I were there during both births. It just so happened that the doctor that was delivering the child on the first birth went to Georgetown when I was at George Washington.
So you had something to talk about.
We
there.
started talking. My poor daughter's giving childbirth. My wife's comforting her, and we're talking about, the old days in school.
Right.
And laughing about a couple of professors that we actually had in common. And at the end of the birth, the nurse came in with a needle. And I said, "Whoa, what's that?" And she said, "Well, this is Hep B." I said, "Don't go near the baby. You want to give it to yourself, go ahead."
Mm.
And the doctor looked at me and said, "You're against the vaccinations?" I said, "Can you justify giving this vaccination to this child?" And he said, "You know as well as I do, there's no justification." That was the end of it.
Thank God you were there.
That was the end of it. The next child was also born in New Jersey. And again, that time my daughter refused. I think I was taking pictures at the time. They actually threatened my daughter with bringing in child welfare services. I mean, it was an actual threat.
Wow.
And my daughter said, "Bring them on."
Unbelievable.
But she's a fighter like I am. And when it comes to her children,
Right.
she's a tigress. And I was very, very proud of the way she gave birth to both children, natural childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
And both of the children are the healthiest children you can ever see.
Mm.
You can actually go through Walmart and you can see children that have been vaccinated recently.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually see it. You'll see them crying, you'll see them sniffling, you'll see their complexions different. It's amazingly easy. We used to call it sidewalk diagnosis. You just doctors would sit at a table in an outside restaurant, and we'd watch people walk by, and we say, "Oh, that person's got this, or that person's got that, or this person looks like that."
But you can do that with the kids that have been vaccinated.
You can do
can't
the same thing with children that have been vaccinated. And if you can see it, if you're trained, you can see it.
And the doctors know it too.
Yes.
The doctors know it. There's a 501c3 organization out in California, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but the man who runs its name's Jock Doubleday, and he put out a challenge 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years ago now.
Yeah, I remember.
To any physician that
$1 million.
Is it up to $1 million? I think it started at 100,000, and I don't know what it's up to now.
I think it went up.
But it's incremented up each year. But basically, what the challenge was for any physician, and I can't remember if it was the MMR or the DPT or one of the early vaccines. If any physician would inject themselves with the same amount of toxins, proportionate to their weight, that they would
toxins.
give a newborn.
None of them will do it.
Nobody. I mean, $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, whatever it's up to now. He hasn't had anybody that's been willing to do it.
It tells you a lot.
That should tell you something, shouldn't it?
It tells you a lot.
They know that they're toxic. If you look at the ingredients in most vaccines, they almost all still contain thimerosal as a preservative. Even the ones that they said that they took the thimerosal out of, they didn't.
No.
And so they've got aluminum, formaldehyde, mercury, a whole host of
all the good things.
All the good stuff for you. I mean, in the book I make, it's kind of a funny example. It's not funny, but it's kind of sarcastic. If a parent were to take aluminum, mercury, formaldehyde, and put it on a sandwich with peanut butter and jelly, they'd call in CPS to take the kids from them.
Right.
But if you're a physician wearing a white coat and you have it in a syringe, you're allowed to inject it directly into their bloodstream.
And the real irony is you never develop a natural immunity.
Mm-mm.
There's not one vaccination out there that's good for longer than 7 years.
No.
None.
If you make it 7 years, if you don't die from the vaccine before the 7 years is up.
Or become autistic.